So kicking things off with the basics, Anu, it'll be great if you could just shed light on, what is EB-5, when did it all start, just historical background.
Sure. So EB-5 actually started in the 1990s, and it was basically created to kind of build up the US economy and kind of a job creation enterprise. So the idea back then was that if you invested $500,000 into a new commercial enterprise and created 10 jobs for US workers, then you would be on your path to get a green card. So I'll talk a little bit more about what that pathway is, but that's where it really started, was in the 1990s. But it didn't really boom until the economic downturn in about 2007, 2008, which is when we started seeing a huge influx of EB-5 investors or people looking to EB-5 as a pathway to the United States. And part of that was triggered, as I mentioned, by the economic downturn. So there were a lot of developers looking for the opportunity to have investment coming in. And it was a great fit for developers who were looking for investment money and investors who were finding out for the first time that they could use this pathway for their immigration status. And so 2008, again, was the start of the boom for EB-5. And there were pretty much no changes to EB-5 from the start in the 1990s, all the way until last year when there was new legislation that was passed. And I think, Abhi, we're going to cover that in a little bit more detail later on. But essentially, the goal was, as I mentioned, from the project side, the project is going to take your money and create 10 jobs for US workers. From the investor side, they have to show kind of two things. The first is that they're lawful source of funds, meaning that all of the money that they're investing can be documented as coming from a lawful source. And then finally, when you get to the green card stage, just making sure that you're eligible to receive your green card. And that allowed people to immigrate to the United States, either if they didn't have any other option. So maybe they didn't have family members who could sponsor them or an employer who could sponsor them, or in some cases, especially it seems like a lot of us here on the panel in the webinar are of Indian background. If you're stuck in the EB-2 category, even if you have an employer that's willing to sponsor you, you may end up waiting multiple decades to be able to have some sort of footing in the US. So this was a great pathway for people in those two categories. And again, as I mentioned, it pretty much stayed unchanged from the beginning in the 1990s all the way until 2022, when there were pretty important changes that came about through the legislation that was passed.
Thanks, Anu.